Hey there, this is Brian, the creator of Smart Connections, the Obsidian plugin. And if you're familiar with Smart Connections, you might also be familiar with Smart Connect, the app that connects ChatGPT to your local computer so you can access, edit, and look up notes directly from ChatGPT. Okay, so what I'm doing here is Sarah Arminta has a new newsletter called Seventh Brain, and she's invited me to answer some interview questions. So instead of trying to answer in text, directly to each question, I'm going to go through the questions, which for the most part I'm seeing for the first time right here. So I'm going to read the question, answer it. Then, using all the fancy, fun new AI technology, I'm going to produce some written answers for Sarah. Depending on how this video goes, I may or may not include that in the package sent back for this interview. So, okay, let's get started. We've got question number 1. Could you tell us about yourself and your involvement in the PKM plus AI space? Okay, so since you already know, I am, the creator of Smart Connections, an Obsidian plugin that I first created. Let me just get these, make sure we're on. Okay, everything looks good. Okay, so I created Smart Connections because long before I even started using Obsidian, I would have this issue where I would, produce a lot of notes. At times that would be in a program like Trello, but I bounced around. I used Google Docs, where I was printing out, like dozens of pages, for a single project, multiple pages, like multiple documentation pages per page printed out, so that I could fit more on fewer pages, so that I could review my notes and, make updates and progress my projects. And when the Google Docs system fell apart, I found myself in Obsidian. But then after maybe 6 months to a year of using Obsidian, the same issue with my system where there just gets to be so much that my project starts falling apart, it started to happen in Obsidian. Except for this time, unlike in Google Docs and unlike in Trello, Obsidian provided this open plugin system or opportunity. And serendipitously, we just got some major announcements from platforms like OpenAI about these new AI technologies that were being, promoted for mainstream use. So, as I was learning about the AI, a light bulb went off, and I realized that I could use this embedding technology to help me solve a problem that was incredibly painful up until that point. The problem that I continuously faced, whether it was Trello, whether it was Google Docs, or my latest attempt at organizing myself in Obsidian, was that I would produce so many notes that inevitably I would be going through a folder or some other segment of my notes that maybe I don't go to very frequently, and I would find extensive documentation, extensive content, valuable notes that I had otherwise just completely fucking forgot. So that was the problem. I would do things and they would just disappear. A lot of people call this an object permanence issue. Something related to ADHD or ADD or, whatever, the diagnosis may be. So, what could be done? Well, with embeddings, I was able to create smart connections, which made it so when I'm looking at a note, AI will surface the most relevant notes right beside what I'm working on. And that was a bit of a groundbreaker, that really made a huge impact for me, because prior to that, in order to, find and synthesize ideas, between different notes, this time-consuming manual process of linking and tagging and organizing notes was required. But now, I could just create things and trust that they will pop up in the sidebar when I'm ready. For just a quick look at what that looks like, let's see, I should have a right over here. So, these are the things that are popping up for these interview questions. I could expand and look in deeper. Looks like it's pulling up interviews, or not interviews, but a conversation I had, which was very, very similar to an interview format. So that's the gist. This is like a recommendation system for your own notes. That was really, so I fell in love with PKM when I learned about the concept. But what got me into the PKM / AI subsector, or like sub niche, was smart connections. So that's what got me into the PKM and AI space. I would say officially, because when I created that plugin, I put it out on the Obsidian community plugin store, and I received a fantastic response from the audience. It led me to build things like the Smart Chat, which allow you to, have a conversation with your notes, which at the time was, much harder to do for the average person. I know now you can, upload files, to Google's cloud, or to, some random startup, or, whoever's offering the chat with your files, or, chat with your PDF type of functionality. But Smart Connections offered Smart Chat and this embedding technology in a way that still kept the values that I saw promoted by Obsidian, which, is privacy, when you use the Smart Connections plugin, while you have the option to use OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, and these other cloud models, you also have the option to keep everything local. And the default embedding model is actually a local model, since that is something that can be run on pretty much everyone's device. It may slow down, if you have an older device, may really cause some performance issues, but at the end of the day, pretty much everybody has the option to embed all of their notes, which can be incredibly personal and private, things you may not want to be sharing on the cloud. Everybody has that option to use AI to find connections between their notes without sending all of their private data to some third party. So, just realizing the impact that could have, really made me dive deeper into the PKM plus AI space. And, that brings me to today. But, let's get moving on in the questions. So, question number 2. How has your own PKM system evolved since integrating AI? I'm still really trying to explore and find those key components where AI just 10x's, just makes a huge outsized impact on my PKM system. I would say the impact currently is peripheral. So what I mean by that is my core PKM system, while it changes, every few months. I mean, it's dependent on so many things, and those things are highly, dependent on what I'm currently focused on. So sometimes I'm taking a project from 0 to 1, just trying to get something out there, and then other times I'm trying to take this thing that's already out there and make it stable and sustainable. And depending on where I'm at, my PKM system changes. And then it's also constantly evolving. And so, the difference I see between changing and evolving is, I have to change depending on, what I'm currently working on, so that I have this best fit, system for what I need. But then evolving is just that constant improvement. A staple of my system would be my daily journal, which, at first I was creating a singular note for every single day, but, I find that I prefer having a weekly note with my daily journal section, and that I just, this way it aggregates my daily journal entries, for that week, and then I can also do more things in that weekly note where I know I'll be spending a lot of time. So for me, that evolution of the periodic note from daily to weekly, that was an evolution that has helped me remain consistent. Because with the weekly note, I keep an inbox in my weekly note, so I always know I'm going back to that weekly note to handle that inbox. When if I was dealing with daily notes, then I, even if I put an inbox in a daily note, then I'm having to flip through a bunch of different daily notes to, just, I guess, manage that inbox. So that's one example of evolution, in my PKM system. And this has all happened since integrating AI. But then what do I mean by the AI has had more of a peripheral impact? So I see a core, so the peripheral impact would be it would be contrasted with a core impact. So a core impact would be nearly every single thing I do is somehow augmented by AI. So meaning, every single note as I'm working on it has some sort of augmentation by AI. And I think just having that Smart Connections recommended notes view, I think that does start to scratch the surface. It starts to scratch the surface of what a core impact of AI on my PKM system would look like. Okay, so while I'm starting to see the Smart Connections pane making a starting to encroach on that area of core impact, the peripheral impacts I think have been much more obvious. So for example, I'm going to let's say I'm going to work on some documentation. Well, in my non-AI PKM process, I'm creating all these tasks, and I'm detailing what needs to be done. These tasks are often specifications for the software that I'm working on, and then I finish the task, and I move those specifications into an outline of, what you can consider like a canonical source of information for what I'm working on. And now I have to make some documentation. Well, in the past, I would be having to just read that and, like convert it to some sort of, consumable format, whether that's just like paragraphs or, visuals. And now I can take those outlines and say, AI, I need this documentation that's related to this outline. And I consider that peripheral because at the core, my notes are still 100% handwritten and typed by me. And that last statement was 100% true until maybe 2 months ago when OpenAI's O1 preview came out. And, I've run this test many times before where, like I have a note that it's just starting to get out of hand. And, a note that could be thousands of words, like there's going to be information about the same thing, like, just like multiple places. It's just like gets to be a mess. I've tried this before, which is, hey, AI, help me reduce this mess of a note into something both useful and manageable. And with the release of the O1 models, I've actually been able to reduce some notes. We're talking about just a handful of notes. So I wouldn't so this is starting to get into how did the AI affect my like core PKM usage and not just that peripheral usage of, hey, I need to produce this piece of content, like help me do it quicker. Like that would be like the peripheral usage, but like actually in my, PKM, like in my core notes, like, like how is it really like showed itself to be useful. And like with the O1 models, I've been able to reduce some notes, particularly I've had, I've taken a lot of notes about like the vision and the mission and the purpose behind the Smart Connections project and the encompassing smart ecosystem that I'm trying to develop. Reducing those notes from what they looked like before, which was question answer, and those questions, they come from, for things like purpose, vision, mission. I have templates of dozens of questions that I've developed over time, based on reading books, based on I have particular ways I like to ask myself questions, so it like unblocks my thinking and enables me to just like really just like get the thoughts out there quickly. So like taking these like question answer style raw notes and converting them into something that basically I could look at, because if you're talking, you have 30 questions with a lot of overlap and, just like lots of outlined notes answering each question. And, fast forward a few months and I'm, working on a content plan and I want to make sure my content plan aligns with the vision. Looking at 30 questions and answers, it kind of just hurts. You don't want to do it. The O1 models enabled me to reduce that. I would still say those notes are a little overwhelming. I'm still, working on, making them better so that they're more useful. But I differentiate the difference between the core impact and that peripheral impact because, talking about the vision, I see a future where AI is the core. Let's move on to the next question, because I think I remember seeing a question, like what's next, and maybe I'll save, what I see how AI can be the core. I'm going to save that for that last question there about what the future might hold. Question number 3. Can you tell us more about smart connections and what inspired you to create it? Smart connections, the idea is to provide this integration layer between your personal knowledge management system and AI. The way I've designed it, the components, like I've tried to create these like primitive components that they are open source through a project I call JS Brains. You can find it on my GitHub. And I try to reduce each of the components to the most primitive, basic requirements for implementing these different concepts, like a chat model or an embed model or a re-ranker model. And then like you have these notes, like what is the like primitive component necessary to represent that note in this system that AI can manipulate and utilize for different tasks. Providing the smart connections recommended, content, the connections pane. That was the start, so smart connections provides this feature that is very common in AI systems. It's referred to as retrieval. And that retrieval, you can imagine it like when somebody asks you a question, looking back into your memories to gain the memories that'll help you, or to just like recall the things that'll help you answer that question. And I see that as a core component of just how humans operate. Every single human, every single person, no matter what they're doing, they rely on their past experiences and their memories to move forward. Since I already touched on the story about the problem where I would just lose notes and they would just reappear, and like smart connections became my way of making sure those lost notes appeared more frequently. Since I already told that story, I'll leave it at this. Smart connections is an AI layer that is designed for individuals. And I was inspired to create it because I think that there's a lot of problems that individually focused AI layer can help solve. Okay, so question number 4. What is your favorite workflow or use case for your tool? So smart connections, that is the part of so I call it the smart ecosystem. The smart ecosystem contains smart connections. When I'm in Obsidian, I'm very frequently using the connections pane, the thing that shows me related notes. It's like, imagine if you had a table of contents of all of your other notes. And that table of contents was specific to the note you're currently working on. So just having that on the side so I could glance over while I'm, maybe I'm reviewing next actions. Maybe I'm, trying to work on documentation, which I've been, I've actually migrated my documentation websites, my personal blog. I've migrated those into Obsidian, since that's my preferred place to work. I think it just makes sense to use as a content management system. So while I'm doing these things, I have this dynamic table of contents that shows me relevant content. I think I want to talk about something that is a use case that is currently being worked on, which is the smart visualizer. My friend Evan Moscoso, he's, worked on a lot of graph type visualizations in his, full-time job. And he created this visual representation of that connections pane. So, it uses, a more visual user interface to show, which notes are nearest to what you're currently looking at. And, the evolution of that, what does that progress into is, currently we have this local graph view where it just shows you those, or that visual based on your current note. But the AI layer, this facilitation layer that I'm working on, will soon provide what you can consider, groups. Groups can be clusters, they could be your folders, and so then getting to see that visual representation, through clustering notes and through seeing if you have a directory, all the content in that directory, what is center to that directory, and what might be in that directory that there's this central group of content, and they're tightly bound in this directory, but then there's this note that's way out here outside of that cluster for that specific folder, and that would show you hey, maybe that note doesn't belong in that folder. So I think that's a really cool use case that it's not quite there yet, but it's just a natural progression of this smart environment that I'm working on. So I know I've thrown out a lot of concepts here. So we have the smart ecosystem. I just consider that every single thing I'm working on. The smart environment, that is this system that is specific to an individual that allows you to define what data your AI has access to. What AIs are able to be used, and what actions or tools are available. That smart environment brings me to really my favorite workflow or use case is actually outside of Obsidian, but uses all of the same smart environment, the same smart environment that provides the smart chat and the smart connections pane in Obsidian, provides the ability for the tool Smart Connect, which connects ChatGPT to my local environment. It allows ChatGPT to access my notes, read them, write them, move them, and most recently interact with a browser. So you may have seen these, this latest development from Anthropic, where the AI, through some external software installations, you can have the AI click around in a desktop community actions in Smart Connect are a bit of a in between what Anthropic's doing, which is like, coordinate, like using coordinates to point and click. The first community actions that I put out for the Smart Connect software. So community actions are sort of like community plugins in Obsidian. These are like not officially supported by the software because the Smart Connect software I want to keep like really focused. So I want to minimize putting out these actions like reading tweets on Twitter and like scheduling or drafting a tweet or liking a tweet or reading my notifications on Twitter or doing all of the same for GitHub. Community actions make it easy to define, these different things that the AI can do, and combine that with ChatGPT's ability to complete multiple actions in a row. While there isn't a specific workflow or use case there, that is where I'm like really excited about discovering workflows and use cases. So like just like for a quick example, yesterday I had all of my notes like related to marketing and content. I put them into ChatGPT, and I said like help me come up with a Twitter campaign that aligns with the stories I want to tell and the different things that I've taken these notes on. And like here's my style of tweeting. And after it produced a few dozen tweets, I was able to say, okay, now draft those tweets. And then it went in one by one, drafted those tweets. So now when I hop on Twitter, I have all these drafts of tweets that I can quickly, clean up and, or just like send as is if it's good enough. And while it may seem not very significant, what I learned from my the transcribe GPT, which is now that I mention it, I'm going to revisit that one in just a second about that's probably my top use case for AI in my PKM. But like realizing how much time is actually saved from ChatGPT being able to directly insert transcribed notes into my Obsidian rather than me copy and pasting each one over, even though ChatGPT transcribes the note, that copy and pasting just takes a significant amount of time that you wouldn't realize, because copy and pasting one thing is a 3-second ordeal. But if you're switching back and forth dozens of times, I very frequently have dozens of notes from one day, and when I say dozens, we're talking about dozens of pictures of notes. Like, so a picture might have 5 or 6 or 7 note cards in it, and if I'm copy and pasting back and forth, that really adds up. And I've saved a ton of time using the transcribe GPT through Smart Connect to just take that picture, and the chat GPT puts it directly into my Obsidian through the Smart Connect software. That's been my top use case. But just extending those actions that are available to ChatGPT, and then just relying on ChatGPT's improving technology to chain these actions together. I'm going to say that, as far as what is my favorite workflow or use case, it's going to be just exploring what's possible by giving ChatGPT actions that directly impact my PKM system. Moving on to question number 5. What excites you most about the intersection of AI and PKM right now? So, right now, I would say really just getting these things that I've been working really hard on, getting them to a foundational place. I feel like I've been working on the foundation of this system for so long, and just getting that to a stable position where I can really start to explore a lot of other ideas that would be built on top of a stable, smart environment. That is what I'm excited about. Is just getting that foundation layer complete. I'm looking ahead at the next question here. So AI and PKM right now, I think really integration, focusing on these words right now. I think that we're still just at that integration phase, and why does it matter? Why do I keep focusing on that? We're not even integrated yet. Because it's sort of like if computers just came out and we're like, wow, computers can do so many things, except for we're all still working on paper. So we have to get all of our paper documentation into the computer. And that's where we're at with AI right now. Is yeah, it may seem like it's all on the computer already, and AI's on the computer, so oh yeah, it just works. But that's not true. And even if you could just make it work, it's not going to be efficient. And there is a there's a diminishing returns on making things efficient. However, I think we're far from that point with AI. Right now it's AI really, has to do a lot of heavy lifting to do things that are simple, like muscle memory type of things for a human user. So what does that muscle memory for AI look like? That's what I think integration looks like. Okay, so that's right now, what am I excited about? Just that integration foundation layer. Question number 6. How do you see the relationship between AI and PKM evolving over the next 2 to 3 years? I'm notoriously bad at predicting time. If you would have asked me a year ago, I would have had everything I've been working on for the past year. It would have been done in 2 to 3 months. A year later, I feel like I'm still working on things that were started in the first 2 to 3 months. So 2 to 3 years though. I'm going to assume the 2 to 3 years is just more of a suggestion, and I'm just going to talk about the future in general. And the future I see is that right now PKM is a very it's a subset of people that have this whether they have this motivation out of necessity or out of some other thing that brought them to PKM, but currently PKM, it's an endeavor that you have to really focus on. You don't just wake up one day and I have a PKM system. It's a deliberate act that takes a lot of energy, and a lot of people spend that energy on their PKM system because there's a lot of value to be had by having a effective PKM system. And I think that value would benefit everyone. So I love working in this space with AI because of the people that can benefit from AI, I think the first people to benefit are going to be PKM users. we often hear about this alignment problem in AI. And they call it a problem because they are, when I say they, I mean it's often critics of AI. They say, oh, if the AI isn't aligned with human values, then it's going to go off the rails and turn the world into a pile of paper clips. Without going into why I don't see that being a real problem, I do think that alignment presents an incredible opportunity, particularly for individuals. So, assuming that the AI isn't going to try to take over the world and do some nefarious bullshit, what will it do? Well, you have many companies out there trying to get the AI to produce a specific deliverable for, their attempt to make the next billion-dollar company. And that takes a lot of, documentation. What is the purpose of that deliverable in that company, and what is their standard operating procedure, and how are they doing things, and what are the inputs and what are the outputs. These are all things that PKM users, Obsidian users, they already have. They're already documenting their goals, their visions for the future, their objectives, how they do things, what's been done, what done looks like. PKM users already have that. So just by the nature of using PKM, they are already ahead of so much of the world when it comes to benefiting from AI. And I think everybody can have that. I don't know if it'll happen in 2 to 3 years. There's some really cool projects like these necklaces that essentially just kind of monitor your life. They're incredibly I cannot see the Obsidian the privacy focused PKM community meshing with these essentially human wiretaps that just record everything, because these PKM users are already they're recording what matters. But imagine your average person that isn't a PKM enthusiast. They're recording all of their data, because they're starting to see that AI having access to information about them makes the AI more valuable to them individually. So I see this future where AI makes a personal knowledge management system for every single person. And what does that personal knowledge management system look like? Well, it looks like the concepts and the systems and the ideas that PKM users are currently developing. So I think it's a really awesome opportunity to be able to, provide AI tools to people that are already building this database of alignment data that is going to make AI more valuable to them. So in 2 to 3 years, and maybe it's 20 to 30 years, but I see this one important thing happening, and that is that the AI manages your PKM system for you. There's a lot of ways that can be done. Like I mentioned, it could be from a recording device. If you're somebody that's out talking to lots of people, it might be a screen recorder for people who spend all day on the computer just working on different pieces of code or content or whatever it may be. But I see PKM evolving into this, like background system. And then, like in that case, why would you have a note-taking application like Obsidian? Which I think is an interesting question. Like, do I think Obsidian would go away if, this is just happening in the background? And my answer is no, I do not. I think the same people that are currently putting that energy into building their PKM system because AI isn't capable of doing it effectively yet, I think those same people are going to want to see what AI is building for them in the background. And I think they're going to go in like brain surgeons and change things, just, tweaking things here and there, really precisely to maximize how AI benefits them individually. Let's move on. Question number 7. What do you think most people are getting wrong about AI-enhanced PKM? I think that I've had problems without AI, simply by producing so many notes. I legitimately handwrite all of my notes, and then I transcribe them into Obsidian, and then they get refined from there. So even with that bottleneck of handwriting, I still have so many notes. It's just unfathomable how that how you maintain that. So I think what people get wrong is utilizing AI to generate notes for their PKM. I mentioned that I've used the AI to reduce a complex note into something simpler. Like I'm still like, it's hard for me, like I'm still on the line. I'm like, was that the right thing? Like, should I have been going through each of those lines so that every single line is like, reviewed and edited? But then I also think if I did it like that, those notes would still be sitting there in their raw, useless form. So generating content for the PKM, I think it's a mistake. I think that there's a place for third-party content. There's a lot of people who like save articles into their Obsidian, and I think that's a valid use case. I think you need to make sure that you differentiate those notes that are from third parties, and you should differentiate anything generated by AI the same as if you were copy and pasting an article from the internet into your Obsidian. You want to make sure that there's a folder or a tag, whatever your PKM method, whatever it is that you decide to differentiate that content with, you have to just make sure it's differentiated. Because if you all of a sudden have a lot of content where you don't know if you wrote this or somebody else wrote this, it dilutes the value of those notes when it comes to aligning the AI with what you want personally. And I think that there's, this is going to be a gray area for a long time. Like if I'm just talking, using the conversational, like the voice AI, and I wanted to take notes on our conversation, or, if I want to, generate notes, based on a transcript or something, there starts to be this gray area of like, well, I said it, but like these aren't my words, but I said something similar. Like where the answer is, for like where do you draw the line between explicitly labeled labeling something as like not your words versus your words, I think that's going to be a gray area for a long time. But if there's one thing I think people get wrong is just generating notes, because it just dilutes the value of the notes that you're not generating. I think that's going to be the number one thing I see people getting wrong about AI-enhanced PKM right now. Besides that, I think right now, spending too much time on, local models, I think is a bit of a, I think it's a bit, like, I understand the privacy component, but unless you're fortunate enough to have $10,000 in computer hardware sitting around, you're really missing out as far as capabilities are concerned. So from context windows, to just the accuracy of models, local models, they're getting much better, faster than I expected. But I think if you're spending too much time focusing on setting up that local model, I think you're going to miss out on novel insights that you might gain through using the cloud-based models. And just to clarify, like, if I could have equivalent local models, then I would be all about it. I think the future is local models. I think the future is less powerful local models running constantly. Sort of like how your brain's just like constantly processing things in what you might call a subconscious. I think that there's going to be a subconscious on your computer, which kind of necessitates local models, because, just if every single person's, in the world's second brain was running on servers, I mean, that just, it becomes a logistics problem that could just be removed by using local models. And I think that those cloud models will always remain for these significantly difficult intellectual tasks, like the equivalent of really like sitting down and working on a problem. I think that for the time being, we should rely on the most capable models for that explicit thinking. But at the same time, I see less powerful models running in the background to just help you keep moving forward. And I really like one of my visions for the future of the smart ecosystem is being able to just wake up and AI say, hey, I know about your visions. I know about, what you see as being your purpose. And this is what you can do today to get closer to your vision of the future. And I think a lot of that doesn't require high-powered models, with the exception of when it does. And there has to be this orchestration. You have to know, like which parts of the process should be handled locally, which should be handled in the cloud. So, to recap, don't just generate notes. Like, unless there's like a clear, like, unless you're very, like, unless you have a good reason for generating notes, which there are good reasons, so one example would be you're just trying to learn something, and if you learn something better, by browsing through notes, there's the linking your thinking. Nick Milo put out a Obsidian Vault with all of this PKM information, and like, what a better way to learn about all the concepts related to PKM than to be browsing through an Obsidian Vault full of those concepts, linked well. So like, imagine, I imagine you can make a Obsidian Vault to help you learn something, and generating those notes is helpful. But I don't see that as personal knowledge management anymore. When I think of personal knowledge management, I think of me, the person, being the center of the system. So just be careful with generating notes, and definitely don't restrict yourself to using local models. Okay, on to question number 8. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone just starting to integrate AI into their PKM system? Okay, so get smart connections, because that will give you 2 key components of what AI does. I mean, there's really, it seems very complex from the outside, but there's 2 primary technologies. You have embeddings, and you have next token inference, which is chat. That's it. And smart connections implements both of those. So you have embeddings allow you to see what's relevant compared to what you're looking at, and the chat allows you to ask questions and then synthesize a response, not just based on your question, but also notes that are surfaced into the conversation using those embeddings. So I mean, get smart connections. If you're not using ChatGPT already, then you're missing out. I think that, the APIs are great, but removing that mental block of every time I ask a question, I'm getting charged money. And, I know there's plenty of people out there where, money, it's a non-issue for them. But I think for the most part, people are concerned about their wallets and, how much money they're spending. And for $20 a month with ChatGPT Plus, you don't have to worry about how much you're using AI. So get that so that you can just start exploring. You get access to the latest models. And even if it's not ChatGPT and you want to use another provider like Google or Anthropic, just those unlimited access subscriptions are very valuable, because it removes any sort of mental block that might prevent you from exploring, and exploring is how you make discoveries. So if you're just starting to integrate AI into your PKM system, do what you can to maximize exploring, and I think that it'll pay off. Okay, question number 9. What's next for Smart Connections that I'm excited about, and where can people learn more about your work? Okay. So, the Smart Connections community, they put together a twice a month lean coffee meeting where I answer questions, very similar to this, like what's coming for Smart Connections. They're able to give me their feedback about what they see being valuable, and how they're using Smart Connections. Please join us in the lean coffee meetings. If you download Smart Connections, there's a link in the settings to the Lean Coffee calendar. And there's, you can find past Lean Coffee meetings on my YouTube. I try to put stuff out, on Twitter, and I have a blog. My personal blog hasn't been very active, but there's a new Smart Connections documentation, which starts to go into a lot of different concepts that I've mentioned. I'm working on a documentation site for JS Brains, which are all the open source components underlying Smart Connections. There are a ton of places you can learn more about what I'm doing. Just find me on Twitter, WFH Brian, work from home Brian. And then explore my GitHub. But what am I excited about? Man, I could go into. I've got a list of projects that I'm like constantly like, okay, I need to get these things moving forward. So like, which one's most important? It's actually really hard because so many of them are interdependent on each other. I have smart templates. These are really cool because right now when we think about communicating with the AI, we think in this like sort of linear interaction where it's like I ask a question, it responds, ask another question, it responds again. But like, what if that was different? So then I've got this like smart templates where you could put multiple prompts into a template and have the AI work through those prompts, and that doesn't have to be in a sort of like linear fashion. Like if you were in a conversation, you could have different retrieval happening for different sections of this template, and the template can be it can be linear so that the sections build on top of each other, but at the same time that's not a requirement. So besides the smart templates, I think that the Smart Connect software, I just finally, after it seems like it's been a year since I wanted to get this feature out, but the community actions in Smart Connect, this is the community plugins of Smart Connect. I'm really excited about, number one, creating more of these actions myself so that ChatGPT has access to do more things directly through my own computer, which solves a lot of issues. I mentioned the Twitter actions earlier. Like interacting with Twitter is not something you can just do easily from a cloud server. I mean, it's very easy for Twitter to say, hey, any traffic coming from these cloud servers, just ignore that. Like, we don't want bots and things messing things up. But if the traffic is coming through your computer and it's like in this workflow that is essentially a human workflow, because you're while AI can still help you take away the bulk of the work, there's still like this human component, which makes it unlike any sort of bot that Twitter would be against. So, rewriting the smart chat, that's something I've been working on for a while. The chat is like a very complex, I take that back. It's not that it's a complex thing, like a chat, you've got chat bubbles, inputs, outputs, you got to call the chat. But like I have some really cool user interface things that tie directly into the smart environment. So like, I'm excited about improving the smart chat, the smart connections pane, like the thing that started all of this. I think there's so much more that can be done there. So, the way I develop these things is I want them to be extendable. I mentioned these community actions where people can contribute actions. Well, I see the same opportunity for literally every component in the smart ecosystem. With the smart connections pane, right now, the logic and the algorithm behind what it shows as the most relevant content is very rudimentary. It seems crazy because there's so many like little numbers involved, but it's actually a very rudimentary algorithm that can be extended and personalized and improved and customized in many different ways. You can add layers, whether you're using an inference model to better generate a reference point for those recommendations, or you can add a re-ranker layer to improve the ranking of those recommendations. The cursor IDE, if you write code, if you're in programming at all, you're definitely aware of cursor. They have this composer type UI, which while there's like this autocomplete that I think a lot of people are familiar with, where just like it the next few words pop up, then there's the next level of that would be like a composer UI, which I think would be very valuable, where maybe you can highlight some things in the Obsidian and say, hey, I have these tasks, like help me prioritize them, like help me simplify the tasks. So I think that there's just a lot of opportunity out there, and what I'm focusing on is building that foundation. I want to enable other people to utilize smart connections, the smart environment that enables smart connections and the smart chat. I want people to be able to extend that software to build their own useful user interfaces, because I really think that what we're seeing right now, especially in smart connections, is just laying the foundation layer of what AI and PKM can be. I hope that these answers, to these insightful questions have, got you more excited about AI and your PKM. Thank you, Sarah, for the opportunity to be interviewed on your Seventh Brain newsletter. I'm really excited. I think that, there's not enough of this sort of content out there. PKM, it was actually a relatively new concept, and I think there's a lot more places we can go. So thanks for inviting me to be a part of it, and I'm looking forward to seeing the future of AI and PKM. Thank you.